John, our first speaker, can you please come to the stage? Ta-da! John, welcome to Belgrade.
Thank you.
I understood you arrived last night, right?
Yes, that's correct. We
Okay.
flew in from Romania.
Is it your first time in Belgrade? I wouldn't say so.
It is.
Oh, a virgin. Okay, we need to fix this, right? John, I think a lot of people may have heard of you or may have heard about Agile Manifesto that you co-authored. And my understanding is that you were inspired for your work in this area and for the amazing achievements through your career of aerospace engineer.
Yes, and working for defense departments primarily, which are not agile.
You mean road construction department? Both,
Yeah,
right?
similar. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. It seems that Agile Manifesto could be a bit outdated because we are sort of outdated or we are not. But I think you will try today to tell us actually how relevant and how even more urgent it is today to accept it.
I think so. It's a little bit like a fine wine, gets better with age.
That is true. And for everyone here, I'm leaving John in your hands. So he hasn't been to Belgrade before. Please, be nice. A few hand claps will be good. Tonight we're going to treat you nice, right? And I understand you are going to treat somebody very nice tonight. Somebody is going to get free drinks from John. One or two. Let's also be polite. But of course there is a catch. There is no free lunch, never in life. And the catch is you have to figure out correctly what is the secret connection between John and Toblerone. Toblerone, sugar, carbohydrates, that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's Toblerone. So there is something that John and Toblerone have in common. Whoever gets it first, free drinks for them tonight in Reka, at the restaurant in Zemun. You can put your answers in the Q&A session, or you can send them directly to me via the Match About contacts and direct message. So we'll just figure out who got it first. We'll know the time, and we'll pronounce the winner tonight. That good? Yay!
Yeah. Thank you, Veronica, and thank you all for being here. I'm honored. It's kind of. Now I see what it's like when you're on stage. Today I want to talk about a little bit of my experience with Agile. How did it come about? There's been, bashing here and there about Agile being dead or we need Agile 2.0 or something like that. I want to talk a little bit around there. And since this is a regional Scrum gathering, I want to kind of challenge you all and ask you for some help. And then we'll have a chance to do some Q&A. So if you can put it in the Match About app, someone will, it can be in your native language. Someone I'm sure will help read it to me. But what I realized after being around different audiences, especially I think it's when I was working with the Polish Agile community, they asked for some help in translating parts of the Agile Manifesto, even though it had been translated by a group probably 20 years ago. They wanted a slightly different translation, and it became relatively obvious that there's a lot of young people that had no idea what the heck we were facing way back then, 20 years ago. And I think it's important to know that, as I mentioned, I was doing Defense Department contracting, pretty much heavyweight methodology. There was a tremendous amount of waterfall, and you think it might be hard estimating now. I remember having to estimate a year-long contract for doing research and development, which seemed like the stupidest thing ever, because the whole point about research and development is you don't know where you're going. So there was a lot of what I would call bad things going on back then. And in my experience, there's 3 really important things. This may sound trivial, but I've been saying it for decades: people, process, and tools. And especially in that order. And tools, even when I sold tools, tools were a really distant third. And we'll go into why that is. But I like to think of it as people, process, and tools. And I'm going to use that throughout the talk because prior to, let's say, 2001, February, I never heard of Scrum. I never heard of DSDM. So there were a handful of us that met, and we all had different lightweight methodologies. I created one kind of out of my own. I was a taxpayer, so it seemed wasteful to do stupid things with process. So I created a much lighter weight process. And if we were, a handful of us gathered to do some work, we would find a way of doing the work. This is going to be an English test, in using the word work in many different ways. But in having that goal and having an agreed upon end state, so to speak, to do the work, as we assemble, we're finding a way of working to do the work that works. Sounds kind of silly. But once you discovered some patterns, after you keep working, you start writing them down. You create a process, and there's a handful of them. Those are just representative of the people that were at Snowbird. I was big into XP, extreme programming, and FDD, feature-driven development. But there's others that you're familiar with. So we write them down. When you have a lot of repetitive, mindless things, we'll create tools even. So back then, there wasn't necessarily the kinds of available lightweight methodologies that you have today. But nonetheless, we were still successful. So we didn't need to wait for somebody to publish a method before we could finally produce some software. And that's important to remember. You're sort of enjoying, 20 years hence, the ability for us to kind of figure out amongst all of the practitioners, what were the common traits? What were the common properties that we each had in our different methodologies? So that's really what we were about. Well, and drinking beer. What's funny, this Polish group that I worked with, they talked about how many times they met, and they had all kinds of documentation. They had many different ideas around the words, and we spent time on some of those. And at the end of it, after they finished and published their Polish translation, I said, I think you probably spent more time collectively than we did in Snowbird 20 years ago. So it was a kudos to them, because we, like I said, mostly drank beer and talked. But the manifesto, when I looked at it a few years back, I realized at the top, the preamble is active voice. It's not like it's not past tense, right? So it's important to know how humble that is, that it's not like we came down from the mountain and handed everyone the answer. And I still feel that way. Agile is extremely simple, but I think it's the hardest thing to do. I struggle all the time. I still write production code for firefighter application. And I'm still working with teams to try to figure out how to do it better. It's very, very challenging. So there's a lot of humility built into that. And I'm not going to say that any of that was pre-thought out. Really, we just scribbled some things down. And you'll also notice while it can also cause trouble, the ambiguity over, we're not saying this is better than that. We have a preference, but it doesn't mean the other side is wrong. I'm kind of a process nut and a tool nut, but the most important, I think, it's fantastic that the very first value is all about people, individuals, and interactions, actually collaborating. And interaction isn't necessarily dropping something in the JIRA and then not talking. So anyway, I want you to just remember that there's a lot of humility built into something that I think is still valuable. And I often joke, this is my joke slide, be humble even when you know you're right. You're supposed to laugh. And I would say that the principles, I'm not going to read each one. I kind of highlighted ones that are important. Even the top two of the two columns, you could stop there and get a lot out of it. Because, once again, satisfying the customer, value, in my opinion, value is typically expressed as something the customer is willing to pay for. And that's real critical. And if you're not talking to the customer frequently, you should. Now, you wouldn't know this, but 20 plus years ago, our mantra, we created a company called TogetherSoft that built software development tools. And we did feature-driven development. Frequent, tangible working results was our mantra. And you can imagine, as a Defense Department contractor, many of those, at least 3 of the 4 values were very near and dear to my heart because of doing the Defense Department work. So, are the values and principles dead? Do we need something different? Do they no longer apply? I say, rubbish. Tell me which value you don't like, or tell me which principle doesn't work. And I'm here for 2 days, so I'll wait. But I think it's still super important. And most of the time when I see on LinkedIn or Twitter someone bashing Agile and they list things that are wrong about Agile, none of those things are Agile. So that tells me maybe there's a lot of new people to the space. Maybe there's folks who haven't been able to totally understand. I know that sounds silly. You just need to learn more. Read it again. But I will say, read it again. You'll see that. But what I want to do in the coming year, and I was just working with Jim Highsmith and Heidi Musser and Sanjeev, a few people we got together. We're kind of on a mission to make Agile accessible again. And what I mean by that is, for me, somehow, maybe people have lost their way. Maybe folks don't understand the people, process, and tools bit, and we're stuck on process or even sometimes tools. But we need to make it more accessible so everyone can enjoy it, because I think the best things I've seen coming out of teams that are really, let's say, able to have business agility, able to work in an agile manner, able to do joyous and meaningful work, that's worth fighting for. So I think it's important. You can be successful. Work doesn't have to suck. So many organizations, why have people maybe considered Agile to have failed? For me, I think it has to do with, maybe this is what happened when I was introduced to heavyweight process. Maybe there were some cool things going on, and then suddenly business turned into this heavyweight process. There was even a military standard for a process. So maybe it's a 20-year cycle. I don't know. But my hypothesis is, as we honed in on that process, and people started publishing it, and people started making certificates and classes and other elements like that, maybe somehow we lost sight of the people side. And I've seen it before where somebody installs a tool, and that's going to make us agile. I doubt it. So I think we need to, in some sense, restore the balance and put, instead of having process and tools sort of crush the people side. For example, there was one group I was working with, and I couldn't quite understand some funny behavior I saw, and it turns out that every time they created a JIRA, automation's a great thing. It's a blessing and a curse. You added a feature, and it would create 13 subtasks. And I wondered why they didn't want to split stories. Like, why is this story so huge? It should be like 3 things. Oh no, we can't split that. Why? Because then there would be, I don't know, what's 3 times 13, right? And now I often use stories like that as jest, but I always remind myself, people aren't coming into work thinking, I know, this will be a really stupid idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right? People come in, they think that's helpful, they think that's, was something good, but we always need to stand back and be humble. Check out if we're actually doing something that's value add or not. Because I think what happens is we end up losing sight of what's really important, which is making the end user smile. So there's a phrase that has to do with, I think maybe I experienced it 20-some years ago, and some people might be experiencing it now, where the process gets stiff, it gets ossified, calcified, however you want to think about it, but it's no longer flexible. And if you see that happening, and if it's not providing value, and I think you especially are at the front lines of being able to help prevent this. Process is super important to me, but not at the expense of the customer or value. And I think we can prevent that. And I think we can avoid creating a more heavy process. SAFe is a good example of really fancy graphics and artwork that looks pretty cool, but also looks pretty scary to me. That seems like an amazing amount of stuff, Agile, Lean, all kinds of things. All sound good on their own, but it becomes this giant, all-encompassing process and tool. So, while this sounds maybe a little, I don't know, does this sound harsh? Maybe not. I'm trying to be gentle, because I realize that we're in a room full of people that care deeply about process, but I hope you also care more deeply about people. Because as I said, I'm a process nut, but I'm also a value nut, and that's the real important thing. Are you doing something of value? And always ask yourself that question. And if you don't know what the purpose is of the system you're building, it's really hard to understand value. And if you don't know that, right, if you're an order taker, like this is why I often have junior developers in meetings with customers, even though my boss might go, well, gee, John, couldn't you just be in the meeting and tell them what you heard? No, I want everybody to be participating, understanding where we're headed, because we all have brains. We all can contribute to making small micro value judgments about things that are either helping us or hindering us. And that's so critical to understand value. So I think what's happened over time, somehow the people part got suppressed in some organizations, and the process and tools, as I said, have taken over. And I think that's a problem. So my kind of call for help from the Agile community, yourselves, is putting the people back on top. We call it like interaction first. This is a type of interaction, but being able to collaborate and work more closely with the customer and yourselves. And I noticed, and this is going to seem like we planned this, but we didn't. Boyan Smuda is having this awesome thing that I'd like to go to, but I don't know if I can. But look at that. He's talking about the same thing, amazingly enough, about the world's a broken place, at least parts of it, not all of it. And there's a little request for the community to help. So that's pretty awesome, because that's asking to put the people back on top. And I think we can do it. Putting people back on top, there's this talk coming up, I think right after me, with Chris Bramley. That's also regarding leadership, people, the struggles we have. There's a lot of times behavior that doesn't seem logical, if you dig into it, you can find out why, because there's usually a reason. And maybe I've been blessed, and I think I've tried to avoid, after my early experiences with large organizations, when I left doing Defense Department contracting, I never again did a fixed price contract, just saying. Only ever did a little time and material. And there's another talk, Vladimir, that's tomorrow, similarly about culture and how important people are. So it actually looks like we might have planned this, and you'll see there's yet another talk. But I think this is a good sign that there's a lot of folks recognizing this is an opportunity for us to kind of reignite, reimagine Agile. So some action you can take back wherever you're working. And by the way, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to come on a Zoom call with anybody, anytime. But if you did a retrospective with your teams, are you living the values? Are you living the principles? Right? Those are some good ways to actually use the manifesto. Because I admit, if you're fresh out of college, or if you're just brand new to software development and you read the manifesto, what are you supposed to do with that, right? It's like, okay, well, I don't get it. Where do I start? Where's the process? There's really nothing there. A friend of mine says, it's because you all got together, you already knew how to do software development. What about the rest of us who are struggling? So I think one way to use it is to basically do a retrospective about it. Maybe pick a value, do it once a week or something like that. And I only put some examples up there. So from my perspective, I think because I'm an aerospace engineer, I took two probably laughable software courses in college. I think the second one was on a screen. The first one might have been cards, which some of you might not even know. Google it. But I've treated it as, for engineers, I like to think we're very, well, I like to think I'm very holistic. We have to think of the whole system, especially aerospace, because if you want to carry more, you might not go as far. If you want to go faster, you might not be able to carry as much. Right? Everything's a trade-off. So you really couldn't just isolate and do one thing well. You had to balance everything. So for me, I have a really important bit in between people and process and tools. I won't go into a lot of detail, but this is something where the technical part is really critical. And this is a recursive approach where the vision, it can be for a whole product, it could be a feature set, it could even be a feature. You have to know some semblance of where you're going, what's your destination, what's your outcome. And the reason is to be able to make, as I said, I want everybody on the team. And you'd be surprised. I'd have fresh out engineers sometimes, within months. First off, the onboarding process, they could commit by the end of the first day. But beyond that, they would also, everybody's valued because you try to onboard everybody into the vision so that everyone's brain is participating. And then the just enough requirements. And you notice the word just enough. How do you implement that, right? What does that mean? Well, there's ways, there's tricks, but just enough. And you see there's a manual board, right, with actual cards. And that was a fantastic experiment with bringing a group of developers into actually the paint manufacturer's factory where the subject matter experts were so that we could build a product for them. And they would come along and say, hey, I have this new thing we want. Okay, we'd put it at the bottom of the board there. There's probably a pointer here. Oh yeah, I don't know if you can see that, but these were the epics. Just add another card. And the beauty kind of the beauty about, you think about these as sort of a giant feature backlog, roadmap. And as we learned more about it over time, because sometimes they would come in and say a little bit more. A week later, maybe a little bit more. And as it moved up to the top, the very top here, you can see a lot more cards. And that was actually about ready to go. There was a board to the right that was basically a Kanban type board. But nonetheless, it's doesn't require a lot of ceremony to get things done. And then while we're doing the requirements, there's domain models. And I don't know if anybody does modeling anymore. But for me, that's the language that we should all speak, is the language of the domain, not some software language, so that whether you're a Scrum Master or a developer, a product owner, we're all using the language of the business, the problem domain, as I call it. That forms everything. All the tests, all the requirements, everything is using the same language, and that's critical, so we're not confused about things. Because most of what I like to talk about is getting the thought bubbles aligned above our heads. That's really important. Then just enough architecture. Maybe you've already built it. Maybe it's just another web app, a software as a service, a multi-tenant app or something like that with a well-known architecture. That's fine. Maybe it's something unique, and you have to figure that out. And then I'm a nut about consistency. Like, I want people to be creative about providing value, but really redundant and consistent, so much so it could be a code generator to be able to build the glue framework between, let's say, a persistence layer and the user interface. I don't need lots of different creativity. I want everything to be super consistent, and then, of course, with Agile, DevOps, always be shipping. And lo and behold, again, I didn't plan this, but it looks like we did. You can always take credit. I see something that I'd like to attend. Jeff Watts, The Lost Art of, essentially, Technical Excellence. A good friend of mine, James Grenning, a fellow co-author, I see him pretty often. Yeah, he always complains about the lack of technical excellence at conferences especially. But it's so important. So, as I like to say, Agile starts with me, it starts with you, right? Sometimes you'll see management saying, oh, we need you to come in and do Agile training, make all the people Agile. And they don't want to change. It's just for other people to change. And that's a bunch of crap. So that's not very Agile, let's just say. And I like to, always a student, never a master. That's from it might not look like it, but I do yoga. Some parts really poor and very low flexibility. But nonetheless, right, that's sort of, whether it's rock climbing or doing yoga, right, it's a very personal practice. And I think Agile's like that. And a lot of it has to do with how you feel, too. I mean, it's going to sound goofy, but if you can pull in how you feel, your felt, kind of what we call your embodied felt sense, you know it. We've been honing this for however many, a long time as humans. You should trust it, because sometimes it comes up when the boss says something or a colleague says something, or you look at some code, or you look at some features, you look at Jira. Yeah, listen to that voice. And the easiest way for me to remember Agile is mind the gap. And it's a little bit of a play on the gap between a train and the platform. But mind the gap. Think of it as a gap between when you do something and you get results. Unit tests can be microseconds or seconds. My test might be a little longer because I suck, but they still pass. Acceptance tests a little longer. Building the whole darn piece of software to get a response that says, "No, I don't want that." Well, that's really a giant gap. That's not Agile. So the bigger the gap, the less Agile you are, if you only remember one thing. That's kind of it. So, do we have any questions in the app? Or I'm not going to guarantee I can look at it. I'll try. Thank you. Catch them while they're clapping. All right, let's see what the match about. Depends if you found it or not. You can also just shout out. Oh, thanks. If you knew back in Snowbird that your hopes for change would fail, I'm not suggesting that they have, do you think you would have still tried? So that implies we knew what, as I like to say, for the 10th anniversary t-shirt idea, they wanted us to come back for the 10th anniversary. My idea was 4 measly bullets, like the bullets on the 4 values, and all this happened. So we had no idea this would happen. Right, so that there's, I don't know if it's true, but my recollection was, this is how I think of it. Ward Cunningham, Mr. Wiki, we did some collaboration on there. I think he said, should we publish this? Remember, this is 2001, right? Like, what's the internet? Kind of brand new. Yeah, why not? Go ahead, publish it. We did something, drank some beer, and we got 4 values. It's kind of cool. We wordsmithed it. So it's not like we knew what was going to happen. And the coolest thing is, I like to say, when we came to Snowbird, we left our egos at the door. I didn't have an ego, but all the other guys did. But we left them at the door. So we didn't really know anything cool would come from this. And it is wonderful. Like, I felt like it unleashed freedom for lots of people. It really struck a nerve, it struck a chord, and I think that's what I want more people to enjoy, because it's there. If you can take it, it's there. It doesn't need to be crushing. It doesn't need to be soul-destroying. The flame of Agile, the ability to really live it and breathe it, it's still possible. If you could change anything from the Agile Manifesto, what would it be today? That's a common question. Would you change anything? No. There. Short answer. I mean, I even looked at the principles. And it was kind of interesting with the Polish community. They mentioned that, yeah, could you please explain this one? I forget if it might have been the simplicity. Just the way it was phrased, I think, I got the impression, like, no, our language doesn't work that way. So it was kind of fascinating to think that some of the elements might need a little translation, even from English to English. But in general, no, I'm not going to change anything. There was a 10-year okay. There it is. There was a 10-year anniversary gathering. Were you present? Yes. And were there any interesting insights? No, I don't think. I don't remember. That's a long time ago. Was there anything useful? Jeez. Good question. Is there anything? I don't think so. I mean, my recollection, this may or may not make sense here, but in the United States, we call them our founding fathers. You know, there was not 17, but 53, something like that. People got together near where I live, near Philadelphia, and they created things like the Declaration of Independence. And with all due humility, and I said this at the 10-year anniversary, I felt like the manifesto is like that. We captured of course, there are a bunch of object modelers there, so you would expect we might distill the gist out of the observances that we had. We captured the gist, or the essence, of how people successfully can build software. And I think the founders captured the essence of how freedom of people should be. And that's, to me, is what I take away from the 10th anniversary. Do you think there are difficulties in implementing the principles today as more and more teams work remote? That's a great question. I used to have we had a team in St. Petersburg, Russia. So I worked with them remote initially, and then I commuted from Philadelphia, lived there 2 weeks a month for a few years. And I would sometimes jokingly joust with Ron Jeffries. Of course, there's the part of the principles has to do with, you've probably heard Alistair and other people talk about the best way is face-to-face. True. But when you're remote, and especially that long ago, where you didn't have all this Zoom, you didn't have all of this internet stuff, we were able to, in essence, I think, forced us to be a little more deliberate and cherish the interactions we had. And so you can do better remote, but I got to admit, I love working with people, and it's way more fun. Well, some people aren't so fun to be with, but most people are. So it's a good question. I think you can still be agile, of course, and be remote, because agile is a relative, right? It's not like there's a ruler that you can say, oh, how agile are you? Well, I'm 11. Yeah, there's no ruler. And it's all really relative to what you're doing and how you're doing it. And one of the ways that I like to work is, I like to say, be lazy. And far too many people do far too much detail, far too in advance, if that translates. In other words, I see a lot of people doing stupid estimates. I don't do estimates unless I have to. And doing giant planning, I don't know why, because it's just an illusion. So that's some of the things I think you really have to watch out for is try to do less than you think you need to do. And let someone ask for more, because then you can do more. But if you do too much, you'll probably never know, and you never get the time back. I don't know what that had to do with remote. What is your one tactic for bringing people on top again? Another good one. How come these keep changing order? Probably because people add to it. Well, I think the biggest thing is to realize the value of talking and collaborating. And it has to be a meaningful collaboration where it's not just cooperation. Like collaboration isn't, well, I uploaded the requirements document to Jira. That's not collaborating. At most, that's like a kind of cooperation. No, I think the easiest thing is to do what we do well, which is talk and listen, which we don't do as well. We often do really well talking and do less well listening, but that's the easiest thing to do is be people-oriented. But the hardest thing to do is have that in a safe environment. So if you feel you can't say things, you probably have to work on that, the safety. And that's why I get back to, you've probably heard of psychological safety, Edmondson, but there's more to it. It's really, we can sense it here if we don't feel safe. Your heart rate might go up, your breathing might go up, right? You can feel that. So I think the biggest thing to do is just start meeting people again. How did the word agile come? That's another great controversy. That's what I love about, I don't think anybody of the authors have the same memory, partly because some of us are drinking more than others, probably. But I think it's also a testament to the fact that, in hindsight, that was an important event. When you're there, it's just, hey, this is a cool thing to do. I haven't been skiing in about 6 years because of the twin girls we had. So yeah, I'm down with going to Utah. I've never been to Utah. It's supposed to have the best skiing. I'm in. So it's not like we said, yes, let's all meet and do this monumental thing that's still going to be talked about 20 years later. Yeah, we didn't do any, none of that was happening. So for me, it started off as lightweight. And you can find in like Agile Uprising, I think I uploaded some of my artifacts because I'm a self-admitted, I don't know if it's a hoarder or a pack rat. I don't know if that translates. Somebody who keeps things for a long time. So I have documents from way back then that I took my notes on. But it was originally dubbed a lightweight methodologies because we were fighting, remember I put that slide up, heavyweight process. I was combating heavyweight process. So it was a lightweight methodologist. And then in English, lightweight's not a good adjective. Hey, John, you're kind of a lightweight. What do you mean? I can lift a lot, I can drink. So lightweight's, my memory is Alistair said, nobody wants to be a lightweight anything, even though we want lightweight methodologies. So somehow the word agile arose. I had been doing agile fighter, it's essentially enhanced fighter maneuverability, like the X-31, different things like that. I'd been doing agile fighter research, and I don't know if somebody said it and it resonated, because being agile is what you want as a fighter plane versus like a bomber. So I don't know where the word agile came. Do you think there are difficulties implementing principles today? Okay, that's remote. If you could change anything, I did that. Do you think continuous attention to technical excellence has gotten better or worse? I don't have a good measurement of that, but my gut says worse. Maybe because, you can just Google it. You can write crap code and then move on, and maybe no one will catch you. Nobody cares. I don't know if that's true, but it feels that it's given less attention, maybe even by conference types. I don't know how many technical conferences there are. But that would be my guess. Anything else? Audience shout out. So for me, I love doing software. I love helping teams have fun doing software. PuzzleSoft, they say they help. The best thing is to build products. I love creating products, designing and architecting and kicking ass building products. That's fun, and it should be fun. Let me ask some show of hands, because I promised a couple of speakers I would do this. I'm going to ask about the kinds of roles that might be here. So how about like leadership, execs, business owner-y types? How many are out there? Ding, ding, ding. A handful, okay. How about things like product owners, product managers, marketing types? Okay, more, that's cool. Now I'll go jump down to, are there any developers here, people who write code? Sweet. Yes, yay for us. Cool. And then, I don't know, did I miss a role? No. Let me guess, how many folks that help teams get stuff done? Like i.e. Scrum Masters and things like that, roadblock removers, stuff rolls downhill, takers. Yeah. Oh, another thing. How many people work on a kick-ass team that you would say is agile? All right, handful, right? Okay, cool. How many work on a team that sort of struggles and sometimes is cool but sometimes sucks? Okay, yeah. See, there's hope, right? There's a chance. There's still a need for us to make Agile accessible again, whatever, I just made that up. But I think, a lot of it has to do with just really trying to understand the values. Go back and talk to your team about the values and the principles. And if you have arguments about what they mean, call me up. I'll happily, you'd be surprised. I often joke with my company that more people from outside my company ask for help than inside my company. But that's okay. I love giving my time. So I think I'm probably out of time. So thank you.